Starting. Okay, welcome to Truth Sentinel, watching over the truth in the news. This is our second live chat, and I've got with me Anthony and Seth. Hello, Anthony.
Hi, Scott. How are you?
Not too bad, thank you. No complaints. And Seth, how about you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm a little bit nervous. I might have told you guys already. I'm going to be stepping into the Muay Thai ring in a couple of days. So I've been training for the last couple of years for this big moment, and it's coming up in a few days. And I'm not 100% prepared, but maybe better than I was a few years ago. Anyway,
I'm sure you'll do great.
let's hope so. I'm going to put the video up on here on the Truth Sentinel site for anyone who's interested.
Should be entertaining.
I've seen some of the promotional materials. It's very funny. Like,
it's quite
local boy made good.
The funny thing is, these they take it pretty seriously over here on this island. I'm going to have these huge billboards of that poster that you saw, Anthony. Is going to be up on this island. They're going to be like huge billboards. They're going to be on the cigarette packets. It's a big deal over here. Yeah.
Damn, you're straight up famous, Scott.
I'm going to be famous for at least 2 days, I think. Yeah. Anyway, enough of that. Today we're going to talk about new innovations in technology, just to start the new year with a kind of light-hearted episode. Well, I think it might be light-hearted. It might be terrifying. I don't know. We're going to be talking about new technology and how it might affect us in the coming years. I think Anthony's going to be talking about driverless cars. I'm going to be talking about AI bots. And Seth, I think you're talking about virtual reality, right?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so I think we were going to kick off first with Seth, and while you start, Seth, I'm going to just check the chat room and see if we've got any listeners in the chat room, and be doing a few things in the background. So feel free to introduce us to your topic today.
Alrighty, sounds good. Well, actually, I'll be talking today not just about virtual reality, but of virtual reality and how it impacts human health specifically. Right now, we have a rather new article from earlier yesterday. Virtual health service, how VR is helping patients face their fears. This is out of PCMagazine.com. It says virtual reality is proving itself a viable and inexpensive way to help people with social anxiety and phobias like arachnophobia. We take a look at several apps and services intended to help you face your fears. And this article continues to go on about how acrophobia and social anxiety and all this stuff can be treated using virtual reality as a medium. However, it is kind of interesting to see the duality of this, because all one has to do is bring up the wiki article on virtual reality, and there's an entire sub section here about health concerns and just in general how it's actually not necessarily the single safest sort of a medium there. But then I was also wondering if you and Anthony had heard anything at all about virtual reality and the leaps and bounds in the last about 5 to 10 years that have been kind of taking off there.
I've just seen people sort of using VR headsets and sort of laughing and almost falling over and things. I haven't actually used it much myself. I probably should get with the program soon. But what about you, Anthony?
I wouldn't suggest it.
Oh, okay. Why is that?
Just the general idea of having a screen about 1.5 inches away from your eyes seems like not exactly the best idea for a culture of people that in general already have phones and computer screens usually less than a foot away from their faces as it is. But I want to hear Anthony's opinion on this one.
I haven't tried it at all. I was just thinking about the Douglas Adams quote, which I'll try to quote here, which is anything that was invented before you were born is part of the natural order of things. Anything invented between the ages of 15 and 35 is a marvelous innovation that's going to change the world for the better. And anything invented after you're 35 years old is a frightening dystopia that's going to cause civilization to end. I mean, I remember, you know, VR masks, like the primitive versions of VR masks a long time ago. And I was kind of curious about them. They seemed kind of cool, you know. But now I look at them and I think, I'm just, I think I've been burned a little too much with some of these innovations, and now I just look and I think, no, I'm going to steer clear of that if I possibly can.
Well,
Yeah.
that generally makes sense. I've seen a lot of that sort of a thing here just as a young person. My entire life, I was promised all of these magical innovations of virtual reality. And unfortunately, the actual reality of it is far more of a kind of a Ponzi scheme scam. Seeing the completely abysmal level of detail put into the virtual reality healing services that they have going on here is kind of a complete joke, in the idea that somehow this VR headset is going to be able to do better than a trained psychologist or therapist is just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And especially when you include that VR systems usually do come with warnings, including those of seizures, developmental issues in children, trip and fall, collision warnings, discomfort, repetitive stress injury, and interference with medical devices. Some users may experience twitches, seizures, or blackouts while using VR headsets, even if they do not have a history of epilepsy or have never had blackouts or seizures before. Yeah. So, not necessarily the safest thing in the world. Also, the idea that virtual reality sickness is going to become more prevalent as people have screens only an inch or two away from their faces, which is also known as cyber sickness, occurs when a person's exposure to a virtual environment causes symptoms that are similar with motion sickness. The most common of these symptoms include general discomfort, headache, stomach awareness, nausea, vomiting, pallor, sweating, fatigue, drowsiness, disorientation, and general apathy. Doesn't sound too different than the general public is with tech neck and cell phones at the moment. For example, in 1995, Nintendo released a gaming console known as the Virtual Boy. Oh God, I actually know what the Virtual Boy is. It's straight hot garbage. Worn as a headpiece and connected to a typical controller, the Virtual Boy received much criticism for its negative physical effects, including dizziness, nausea, and headaches. These motion sickness symptoms are caused by a disconnect between what is being seen and the rest of what the body perceives. The vestibular system, the body's internal balancing system, does not experience the motion that it expects from a visual input through the eyes, and users may experience VR sickness. This can also happen if the VR system does not have high enough frame rate, or there is a lag between the body's movement and on-screen visual reaction to it, because approximately 25 to 40% of people experience some kind of VR sickness when using VR machines. Companies are actively looking for ways to reduce VR sickness. And this is to include
VR sickness. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow. I just wanted to share something that I found just then. Scott, you mentioned you've seen people falling over. Apparently, according to CNN, this is a major habit. A major drawback of VR headsets, because you can't see in front of you while you're wearing one, but they do have what they call a chaperone feature. But this article is suggesting the chaperone features are not really not really very effective. And one recommendation in this article is that you should, quote, keep pets, small children, and other obstacles like ceiling fans out of the area.
Sounds completely safe to me, right?
So have you got kids? Yeah, I've got 2 male obstacles and 1 female obstacle. Oh, and we've got a cat obstacle.
People.
Talking of pets and strange animals, can you explain what this weird picture that people can see at the moment, this kind of inflated bird or something you've got as your image, Anthony?
Sure, yeah. Well, it's horribly off topic, but it's a photo I took in Kiev. In Kiev, there's a kind of suburban community project which has become like a major tourist attraction in the city. It's called Paysajna Alea, Landscape Alley, and it was a really ugly, area of tenement blocks, and they turned it into this crazy kind of extended playground where you've got all these kind of Alice in Wonderland characters and giant snakes that kids can run through and whatever. And it's become like a huge kind of grassroots based success. So it's really cool. And this thing is like a little fat, fluffy bird made of tiles. I thought that was kind of cool.
Cool. Well, it's interesting anyway. And we've got a comment from the chat room from Unsilent J, who says that he thinks we're all doomed regarding VR technology. And Hot Retarded Chick says, I think VR is great for the military. What do you say to that, Seth?
Honestly, I feel like VR for the most part has been, versus what they've promised, a major letdown. But some of the obvious drawbacks and negatives for going forward to the future include what we were just talking about of health concerns. There's the general concerns of the detachment from reality and social communication and cognition in general. By having these devices strapped to your face 24/7 and having most of your input be coming from virtual signals and virtual sources, which leads to a serious social disconnect. And then, of course, just good old-fashioned privacy, which most VR systems leave you extremely vulnerable to mass surveillance. And the cost of information gathering when using VR services is insanely low for the companies that are providing those services. I'd say the VR for the military, not exactly sure how that's going to help anything. I know they used the acclimation process with quote unquote virtual reality when it comes to bombing simulations and flight simulations, and have been using that for quite a while to acclimate people to the idea of flying autonomous drones and dropping bombs on people. I know that's definitely a product of the quote unquote video game or flight simulator / VR age. And I know that it's going to get a lot worse. I know that they have also promised to be able to use VR to help troops in the military get past PTSD. But again, I think it's a trivialization of post-traumatic stress disorder in general, and kind of makes people think it's just some little thing that could be easily batted away with a few hours of some artificial program. I think the VR industry in general seems to be like many of these tech industries, where leading companies within tech industries that do nothing but more boondoggles, more get-rich-quick scheme sort of scams where they can promise near infinite possibilities, wealth, happiness, connection between people, all of this type of stuff, while providing the absolute bare minimum of technology to make it happen. But of course, the general public is so conditioned through movies and television that they think that all this stuff is coming right on down the line. I mean, my God, how many people are just expecting at any moment the next Matrix is going to be a thing? I mean, looking at movies and stuff, you'd think that, what is it, the movie with Bruce Willis there, that Surrogates, I think it's called. It's this exact same thing. People think that there's going to be some artificial reality type thing that's coming right around the corner there. But honestly, it's not happening. Anybody that's actually looked into any of these VR programs in general can tell that the graphical capability and the audio capability, all of this stuff looks like something out of 2002 from a really bad indie video game sort of project. And it's just, I don't see it taking over anything. I don't see it being that useful, but I do see it being more of a thing in the future because of the very nature of where technology, how easy it's going to be to manipulate and profiteer off of it.
I also heard there's a little controversy at the moment in the US. Tell me if you've heard anything about this, Seth. A little controversy because of some advertisements that the US military have placed specifically trying to get gamers to sign up to the military, because they feel like gaming skills are actually going to be very helpful in the military actions of the future. And there's a little bit of a backlash against this because, as one Australian commentator said, it's depressing if it's true and it's depressing if it isn't.
Indeed. Indeed.
Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, I actually have, and it's pretty disturbing. I think a lot of it seems to boil down more towards the direction of the military wanting to make up for the lack of recruitment numbers that have been happening in recent years, because the general public is not interested in joining the military, especially in a nation that's constantly at war around the entire world, or sorry, in kinetic actions around the entirety of the world, just because, you know, this country doesn't go to war anymore, naturally. But I think in general, it's promoting younger people that are gamers, that are into the Call of Duty and all this type of stuff, to think that, well, maybe I could join the military over this. I think there's two parts of it that are negative. One, in the sense that you're not bringing people that have a true interest in the military into being in the military. You're bringing people under, essentially Shanghaiing, pseudo Shanghaiing a bunch of young, impressionable kids into joining the military, into something that is not at all what they promised. And at worst case scenario, it's exactly what they're promising. And most of these young people are going to be behind autonomous drones and things of the like, and are going to be machine gunning people down from a computer screen somewhere in Texas or Nevada somewhere, rather than actually face to face with another human being, which, granted, is, we've seen human beings are more than capable of war crimes and atrocities all around the world without the need for a buffer layer of technology. However, I'm sure all of us can agree, we've seen what happens when the buffer layer of technology is put there, of how much more dehumanized and disconnected and detached people can be from the actual violence itself.
Scott, is it true that one drone stopped departures and arrivals at Gatwick Airport over the holidays?
Yes, it was kind of interesting story, or relatively interesting anyway. Yeah, it caused absolute chaos, and the weird thing is, well, the conspiracy theorists said, well, maybe this was some kind of false flag event to kind of say, hey, we need to control a drone so that members of the public can't have them, because, yeah, this alleged drone stopped all flights for a day or two, caused absolute chaos, people having to cancel their holidays, no flights to and from the airport. And they were talking, you know, there was chat shows, hosts were talking about it. We're talking about it now, actually. Basically, they were saying, bring the military in, shoot it down. And it went on for a couple of days, and then they arrested 2 people over it, and then they were held for 24 hours, I believe, and then released. And they got the wrong 2 people.
Weren't they an elderly couple?
No, they weren't elderly. They were middle-aged. Unless we are elderly, Anthony, and that would be horrific. And anyway, they arrested the couple, released them 24 hours later. They were completely innocent, and now they're traumatized and seeking help. And some people, and then when the police gave a broadcast interview, they admitted that actually they weren't even sure if there was a drone. It was just reported that there was. That's
the sort of thing that makes me think that the conspiracy talk about it is probably correct, in the sense that
exactly. It's not out of the question that there was no video of any drone there. That it was all basically someone saying, "Hey, look, there's a drone," and no actual corroboration that this drone ever existed. There's no video of it, no photograph of it. So it's a bit weird. Yeah. So yeah, it caused absolute mayhem.
Things are really going weird in the UK now. It seems like in the lead up to Brexit, things are just getting really strange. I heard one story also today about I think a government minister, it was, who is in hot water now because he contracted a company to replace the ferries that used to run, I think it was to the Hook of Holland from the UK. So he's contracted this British company, right? But the company he's contracted is not actually a ferry company, never has been a ferry company, doesn't have any ferries. and so they quickly, like, this company, so it's, you know, it's obviously jobs for the boys, right? But this company has gone about this in such an inept way. They put together a website quickly, right? And they put terms and conditions on their website, but it was discovered that the terms and conditions were copied and pasted from the terms and conditions of a takeaway restaurant. So there are things in there like, please ensure that you give accurate address details for delivery. It just sounds like things are really, like, the rails are really falling off over there.
I'm not sure the rails were ever really on, to be honest.
Agreed.
I wonder if on that website it had an AI bot. That's my kind of. I'm trying to segue into our next.
It's a hell of a segue. I love it.
Thanks, Seth. Yeah. So my topic is going to be AI bots, and basically, it's estimated that companies could be expected to cut their costs by $8 billion by 2022 if they incorporate AI chatbots in their customer service departments to save, paying people basically. And these AI bots will, you'll have an online chat with them, and you may think that you're talking to a human. In some ways, you can see that kind of makes sense for small transactions, maybe. But businesses have been told that basically chatbots can answer customers' inquiries cheaply, quickly, in real time. So there's some obvious advantages. They can answer all times of the night and day. They don't have to get paid. They don't have to be fed. So you can see the advantages. But then, of course, there's people saying beware of these AI technology and chatbots. They're saying basically, people like not my favorite person, but people like Elon Musk and the late Stephen Hawking were among 100 people who petitioned the United Nations to ban AI technology that could be used in autonomous killer robots. I think I'd probably support banning those as well. But basically, what I was going to say was Rollo Carpenter, CEO of Cleverbot, is more of a optimist. Basically, he thinks we should use this technology, and we can use it for good. And he's actually created an online bot that you can actually chat to at the moment. I thought we could ask it a few questions. It's called Cleverbot. People can check it out at www.cleverbot.com. I had a bit of a chat before the program, our show, and we started to get into an argument. He's saying that I'm an AI bot, and I'm pretty sure I'm not. Although I was going to say, maybe in the future there will be billions of AI bots inhabiting a planet and wondering how they got there. So maybe this bot's right. Are we in fact bots anyway? But that was just a throwaway thought. What I was going to say was, Seth or Anthony, do you have a question I can ask this bot? Because I've got him on the line at the moment.
Okay, let's see. Seth, you go first.
Okay. Oh, wow. If I had one thing to ask a robot that I have no faith in at all, what would it be?
You can ask it a philosophical question if you like.
What is the meaning of life?
Okay, what is the meaning of life? And the AI bot says
42.
Thinking. He said he already told you that. That's true actually. He's quite correct, because I did ask him earlier, and I've lost his reply. But I can tell you it wasn't very inspirational. So yeah, maybe that's he's basically saying he already told me that, and I can't remember.
Lovely.
Yeah, sorry about that. Anthony?
Which if any of the following people are still alive? Benazir Bhutto.
Oh, wait a minute. You want me to write all these? Make it a simple name.
Okay. Do you know Benazir Bhutto?
Yes, that's simple.
Okay, all right. JFK.
Okay, well, actually, I just typed "who is alive" and accidentally pressed return before I got the name, and it says me and not you. It still continue with this argument that I'm the bot and he's actually a human.
Oh my god!
Wow, it's just trolly to the max. But of course the CEO of the company, Cleverbot, is like, we should continue this technology. Yeah, right. It's like the car manufacturer guy that's like, hey, we don't need to clean up and have cleaner emissions and stuff like that from exhaust. I mean, come on, this technology could be used to help humanity.
Yeah, well,
Cleverbot is clearly a cutout company. And you're really talking to the Internet Research Agency in St. Petersburg.
Okay, I asked it if it was a troll, and it said no. Are you a goblin? It's a bit childish. In the chat room, we've got they want me to ask it if it would mind being destroyed. So I'm going to ask it that. So let's ask it, would you mind being destroyed? And let's see what the bot says. I'd prefer to be a man. They haven't quite mastered these clever
Ooh,
bots.
transgendered robot or trans species bot, transracial bot. I don't know what you'd call that.
Yeah, well, that's a bit weird.
Transhuman bot.
Would you mind being destroyed? I'd prefer to be a man. It's a bit strange. Strange answer. The other question from the chat room is, ask it if it wants to be human. I think I know the answer because it's going to say that it is human and I'm not. So
ask it if it would like you to become human.
Okay, right. Would you like me to be human? Let's see. And he says, you said you were a couple of minutes ago. Okay, so that's a fair point from the chat box there. I did say that. So well, maybe we can ask it another question later. But I guess the more serious point, not that serious, but I think people are fed up of talking to automated things anyway when it comes to customer service. And I think talking to chatbots, I have a feeling that I've already talked to some of them. You know, like those online chat help things.
No joke.
Some of them seem... I've got a feeling some of them are human, but actually they seem like they're robots. So it's, you know, it's a bit of a gray area now. Like, you know, you can meet some humans who are very robotic. And then
well, you may as well when you have a literal like script that you have to read answers off of to scripted questions and stuff. And so, of course, there are times when you seem absolutely grating and like a robot in that case.
Yeah, well, yeah. The dehumanization. Maybe that's the plan for the future. The dehumanization of humans. And
to the point you can't tell.
The humanization of robots. But I was talking to a student today because this subject actually came up in our lesson about future tech. And they were talking about robots saying, you know, they can, in the future, you'll be able to say, make me a coffee, and the robot will make you a coffee. And actually, that sounded pretty good to me. So there are some benefits. What do you think, Anthony? Benefits of having AI technology and robots, or a disaster waiting to happen?
Look, we are really, in these last two episodes, we've really come across as hardened cynics. But I don't see many benefits. But I was going to mention when you said that people are tired of talking to automated machines and so on. I think that's true. But then I thought there was that one example. There was a guy in the 60s, I think, who created a machine which could kind of psychoanalyze people, right? Well, this was his idea. It would help people with their psychological problems, and the way he programmed it was to essentially reflect back at them what they said, which is a common psychological technique. Yeah, and apparently this thing was a huge hit. Starting with this guy's secretary, he left his secretary in the room with this machine one day, and when he came back, she just told him to go away, get out of here, and was talking to the bot and didn't want to stop because the bot was just reflecting back at her images of herself. And I think that's probably where AI might be the most dangerous in some ways. We already are living in a culture where ourselves are reflected back at us probably more than at any other time in history. And I think AI might accelerate that even further, so that we do really become this kind of narcissistic culture that some people are already worried about us being.
Well, it kind of reminds me of another episode of Black Mirror, Anthony, where they had AI technology, and one guy who fell in love with his AI bot, I think it was, and I think there was a maybe I shouldn't give away the twist at the end, but yeah, he fell in love with his AI bot, and she was the perfect woman, listened to all his problems, and then at the end he found out that I'm going to give away the twist. I think at the end he found out that whilst he was deeply in love with her by this time, that she was actually conversing with millions of people across the world who were also in love with her. So he'd been two-timed or million-timed by the software AI.
Almost like Black Mirror is meant to, you know, be a dark, distorted mirror of reality. Almost, I think it's wonderful stuff of this as far as the political commentary. It does a way better job than Twilight Zone on all sorts of stuff, at least for a more modern audience.
Yeah, well, I think that we last episode we were talking about dystopian futures, and I think we're at a kind of crossroads where with all this technology and with society in itself, where we can go one of two ways. We can go down the middle. We can sort of go the way where and put controls on all of these things so that they're more beneficial than bad, or we could go down the dystopian route. And I'm a positive person, but I just think we're probably going to go down the dystopian route because of the people that we elevate to the top in society. I mean, yeah, I just think that's the reason why, because humans just seem to elevate the worst kind of people to actually control things from the top. So they're going to choose the most dystopian path. That's my view, unfortunately.
Do you know what? When the revelations about Facebook started to come out last year and the year before, there was a moment where I think it looked like big tech was going to be much more regulated than it had been previously. And this, I think, is actually a huge issue. I mean, if you're in the transportation business, if you're in telecommunications, whatever business you happen to be in, it's generally agreed upon, even by the most right-wing libertarian kind of politicians, that regulation is appropriate for most industries, but big tech has been the exception. And now we see, every time you hear anything about Facebook, for example, they like to depict themselves as scrambling to take more responsibility for social issues and working more like a publisher where they redact content and all this stuff. And the reason why they're doing that is because they don't want to be regulated. They want to convince everybody that they are responsible enough themselves, that the government doesn't have to step in. It seemed to me for a while last year like public opinion was turning on them, and we were going to finally see some regulation of these people. If we do, then I feel like, okay, regulation itself is a minefield and has all kinds of, there's obviously no perfect regulation, and a lot of it is very flawed. But if we do see that regulation happening, it might rein in some of the worst excesses we're seeing from the tech industry. But I don't feel very confident at the moment that it's going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, so we're all painting a dark future. What do you think, Seth? Can you cast any optimism over this?
I suppose in the sense that people are definitely going to have a lot of convenience in their life. If you think that's a positive thing, you really don't like lifting up one foot to go step in another direction and have to keep walking and, exercising your own muscles, exercising your own eyes, exercising your own mind even, then you're going to love this future. It's shaping up to be beautiful. And at least, I'll say for lazy people and for people that are in love with technology and the sort of people that are going to fall in love with computers and their animated waifus and all this type of stuff. Yeah, I'm sure they're going to have a great time. I'm sure there's going to be a great future. So I guess there's positivity in this situation for that and for those kind of people. But for people like you and me, I don't know, Scott. It's going to be an interesting next couple of years.
It is indeed, and I think it's probably time to go on to our last topic, which is driverless cars, which has been sort of coming in and out of the news over the last sort of year or two. Anthony, would you like to lead us into the topic?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I know it's a pretty well-covered topic, but there was a story in the New York Times on the 31st of December, so about a week ago now, that caught my attention about attacks on driverless cars. So specifically, these are cars belonging to a company called Waymo, which is a subsidiary of Alphabet, Google's parent company. So it's a sister company to Google. And so essentially they're Google cars. And so basically the situation is this: Waymo hasn't perfected its driverless car technology yet. And it was looking for a place where it could do some trials in the real world. And the mayor of this town called Chandler in Arizona, a guy called Jay Tibshraeny, allowed Waymo to use his town as basically a giant science lab. In fact, when the company first announced they were going to take their safety drivers out of their cars in Chandler, which was the first time that had been done, this guy, Tibshraeny, the mayor, announced it was a great milestone. But in fact, he wasn't even using his own words, because his entire speech was written for him by the company. So, so this is
gotta
now
love this country.
Oh yeah, and so it's been going on for some time now, and I mean it's also happening against a backdrop of several other disasters. There was another town in Arizona called Tempe, where one of Uber's driverless cars ran over a woman and killed her last March. And there was an earlier scandal where Uber cars were found to be running red lights. And so basically, the residents of Chandler are not down with this at all. So they've been messing with the cars for a while, trying to kind of put a spoke in the wheel. They do things like overtaking the cars and then stopping suddenly to try to taunt them, quote unquote. But some people have gone further. There was one driver who recently tried to run a Waymo car off the road, and another person was photographed pointing a gun at one of the cars, apparently preparing to shoot it, or maybe just kind of fainting. It's difficult to tell from the photo. And there have been plenty of smaller incidents like rock throwing and tire slashing, this kind of thing. Now, since the New York Times reported this about a week ago, a lot of people have commented under the article, and many of them are saying that the residents of this town are being childish, or that they're vandals. What they're doing is against the law, and so on. And I kind of get that, but I think it ignores several real issues. First of all, driverless cars are not benign. They're just not. They're for one thing, they're a form of automation, and they're going to take jobs from people. In this climate where we hear so much fear about immigrants taking jobs from others, I think it's fair to say that in reality, we should be looking at automation, because that's where most of the job loss is going to be over the next 50 years. And it's already started, And also it's going to hugely decrease the quality of the jobs that are left for, kind of unskilled and low-skilled workers. And I mean, if you want proof of that, just talk to anyone who works in the vast warehouses that Amazon or its competitors use. These people are doing outrageously repetitive and dangerous jobs. They're being coerced into situations which you wouldn't believe. There was one scandal recently where there were some employees in one of these warehouse companies standing next to a conveyor belt. One of their co-workers died, and the company said, well, we still need to fulfill our quota. So they put traffic cones around the dead body and forced the other workers to continue working. And that's because, and this is a real thing, it really happened just a few months ago. And that's because there are just tiny pieces of this whole processing, sorting, rerouting packages now that are handled by humans. The rest is handled by automation. And so these jobs are really heading in the direction of being, some of the closest jobs we've got to slave labor in the West at the moment. And that's going to become a much broader thing as time goes on. And some of the residents of Chandler, when they've talked about, why they have such animus towards these cars, some of them have mentioned this. But also, I mean, they weren't polled to see if they were happy to be Google's lab rats. Google approached the mayor, who's clearly in their pocket ideologically, if not financially, and he and his colleagues made the decision themselves. So, really, I mean, isn't democracy wonderful? I mean, it just shows how powerful these these companies are and how divorced their interests are from the interests of the population generally.
Although I would say, Anthony, if one of you two died during this live broadcast, I'd have to carry on. You know, we do have a show to
Jesus.
That's right. I've got the traffic cones ready. I think in the UK they're called bollards. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. I've got some bollards ready to go just in case. In fact, there was buried in the details of the story. There's a really striking, or I thought it was a really striking demonstration of just how powerful these tech giants are. There was one incident in Chandler where a motorist, quote unquote, wove through several lanes of traffic to taunt a Waymo car, right? And the company wanted the police to arrest this motorist and punish him or her. So they called the police department to their offices and they showed them videos of the incident, right? But then the police said, oh, okay, good. So let us have these videos for evidence. And the company would not let the police take the videos. Now, can you imagine you as an individual had a video on your phone which included footage of an alleged crime, right? And then the police find out about this. They ask you for the video and you say, well, look, if you come to my place, I'll show it to you, but I'm not going to give it to you. Sorry. I mean, you know, you'd be arrested as soon as the police stopped laughing, right? So,
yeah, money is power, though.
Well, yeah. And these companies, you know, have a ridiculous amount of both, to the point where they're allowed to regulate evidence. So anyway, look, that's what's happening in Chandler, and for one, I'm totally on the side of the residents in this one. I actually hope, you know, they form a militia, because you know, usually when you hear news about militias forming in the US, it's kind of scary. But in this case, I think it would be totally justified, and I could, you know, experience the fun of like rooting for my team.
Yeah. See, when it comes to driverless cars, I kind of think, like most of the technology we've discussed tonight, driverless cars, virtual reality, AI bots, on a small level, I can't see a problem with them. I think they could be useful. Like, I wouldn't mind getting in say, a driverless car that would take me from one terminal of an airport to another terminal. And it meant that, you know, if there was a little pod car that turned up and the door flung open, it said, "Get in, I'll take you to Terminal 2," then that's fine, you know. But would I?
But is it really necessary? Have you ever been to the airport in Kuala Lumpur?
Yes, I have. In fact, funny you should say that, because I'm going there in about 4 days.
Wow. Okay. And have you been on the train inside the airport?
The express one, you mean?
It's the one, not the one that goes to the airport from the city, but there's a train inside the airport, because I mean, it's a huge airport, as you know, and it does exactly what you've suggested. Like, the terminals are so far apart that, you know, you're not going to walk it, and the taxi is going to cost you real money. But they just put a train in, so every couple of minutes it just arrives.
You mean that 15-minute walk I did last time I went there last month? I didn't have to do that.
If you only walked for 15 minutes, you're a pretty fast walker. It's huge.
It was a hell of a distance to walk. Yeah. No, I hadn't seen this train, to be honest. I didn't know where it was.
It's only in one section, and you know, there's clear 1 and there's clear 2 kind of halves of the airport. So it's only in one of those. But yeah, I mean, that to me, that completely obviates the need for a driverless car, because you've got a train that does the same thing for a massive number of people.
Train, yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is a driverless car going between terminals would be kind of similar to a driverless train, and so I can't see a huge problem with that. But I guess on a more dystopian angle, I could see that maybe in the future you're going to have driverless police cars, which are going to be like apprehending people or stopping people. I think that's when this technology will be going too far for me, because I think all the police forces, security forces, they love this kind of technology, and and drones, AI.
It's ironic because it's destroying their very livelihood out from under them, whether or not they are intelligent enough to realize that they themselves will be replaced by robots that they are promoting everyone else to be replaced by. And then don't worry, we're just supposed to have a giant class in the like hundreds of millions of people in all these different countries here that have no goddamn job, that have no marketable skills, because every single job that they could have done has been overshadowed with robots. So what are they supposed to do? Just sit there and be poor, just don't exist anymore. don't exist anymore. I mean, you know, you were a cab driver. Now you're completely replaced by driverless cars. So I mean, just get over it, man. Just get over it. Whatever, right?
Yeah, well, that's. I was actually thinking while one of you was talking earlier. That it reminded me of when I went to Tesco's, like a supermarket in the UK last year, and they've been bringing in those kind of automated cashiers. So you can scan your own goods. It tells you how much, and you pay the money. And they're getting rid of all the but cashiers. And you've got the human cashiers there who are actually telling you, "Oh no, don't go and speak to the human." They don't actually say human, that's it. But don't go and speak to the cashier. Go to the automated machines. And there's 5 automated machines now, and only 1 human cashier. And it's like humans are so stupid. They're actually helping destroy their own jobs. I found it kind of weird, you know.
Yeah, that's depressing because, I mean, you know, if you remember like being a teenager and being in high school, if you wanted a little bit of freedom, you needed a little bit of money. And if you wanted a little bit of money, one of the best places to get that was by taking a part-time job at a supermarket.
Exactly. And
or a fast food restaurant or whatever. And they're already rolling out automation at some fast food restaurants as well. Yeah,
indeed. I thought we could finish today and maybe some of these chats by me sharing a screen, the screen of the BBC website. It doesn't have to be BBC, but I'll do that now. Can you tell me if you guys can see that at the moment?
Yes, indeed.
Right, so I thought we could just, for the last couple of minutes, we won't talk in depth about these, but I thought we could just have a quick scan at the news, if you can see it, and just kind of do a bit of a small news roundup, or just have a quick look and comment on everything. You can see that the news here is Brexit vote will definitely happen. That's all a big con, if you ask me. This whole Brexit thing. I don't think it's going to happen. Actually, I think it's all been a big charade. This story here: Saudi woman trapped in Thailand trying to flee, and she's she's trying to escape her Saudi family, who she reckons they're going to kill her if somebody doesn't help her. And I actually wrote to her on Twitter and invited her on today's show. It's saying basically, we could use, she could talk live to a live audience, and I wanted to help her basically because I did a show with Jasvinder Sangira about her kind of situation, and I passed on Jasvinder's details to this woman on Twitter, to this woman in this story here, because Jasvinder can help these kind of people. So, but is there any story here you want to make any comment on? There's the U.S. withdrawal.
U.S. withdrawal from Syria, conditional, quote unquote. Who called it, man, from day one of all this bullshit of we're pulling out, we're going to bring all the troops home. Same thing with Afghanistan of just the war is over. Trump ended the war, the great ender. It's the exact same thing as Obama there, where it's over and our troops are gone, but there's still 10, 20,000 guys here at our multiple base installations around the country. I'm like, yeah, because that's wonderful.
Well, they're mostly fry cooks, interior designers, hairdressers.
Yeah.
Before we finish up, Scott, maybe you can drop this into an earlier segment later. Can I mention one more thing about driverless cars? Because
yes.
I really wanted to ask you guys what you thought about the deeper ethics of driverless cars. Because actually, I think maybe more than almost any other invention, they've really put us in an interesting and worrying position, I think, because we're in a position now where we need to, if we're going to let this invention go ahead, we need to cede some moral authority to the companies who produce these cars. By that I mean, when you're programming a driverless car, so part of the programming concerns what the car should do in an emergency situation. Especially where, whatever evasive action the car takes, someone's going to get hurt. So you actually need to program in directives about what kind of people should be saved and what kind of people should be sacrificed if the car has to choose. In other words, with driverless cars, we actually have to rely on corporations like Google and Uber to make ethical decisions for us, which can literally be matters of life and death. And I think one of the most interesting aspects of this, which has emerged so far, is that MIT weighed in on this a couple of years ago. They were just trying to make the process a bit more democratic, get more people involved, and try to force companies to listen to what people might think about these situations rather than just make all the decisions in their boardrooms and engineering departments. So they commissioned a really eye-opening piece of research, which I recommend that everybody listening goes and has a look at. It's just amazing. It's called Moral Machine, right? And it's an online game involving driverless cars. The idea is to try and capture the moral instincts of a very wide sample of international respondents on questions relating to, like, if it comes down to it, what kind of people should be saved in a car accident and who shouldn't be saved. And I know that sounds fanciful, but this really exists. You can go and see it. The website is Moral Machine, all one word, moralmachine.mit.edu. And about 2.3 million people have already played this game and given their answers. So the MIT researchers, they made little cartoon scenarios where you get to decide the outcome. So, for example, your driverless car might be driving towards a cement embankment, right? And if it hits the embankment, it's going to kill the occupants of the car. But the car can also swerve in a couple of different directions. And if it does that, it will save the occupants, but it will kill some other people. Yeah. So it might go like this. For example, in the car, there's a pregnant woman and a young, physically fit man, right? If you do nothing, you kill those people. On one part of the road, there's an elderly woman and an overweight man, and you can swerve to hit them if you like. Or alternatively, you can swerve to hit a young man carrying a briefcase and a small child. Again, I'm not making this up. This really exists, and it's MIT, so there's a good chance their findings will actually be used in the real world. And we know some of their findings because they've already published some. So, for instance, there's people in more than 200 countries have taken part in this, and there's consensus across cultures that humans should be saved before animals, right? Larger groups of people should be saved before smaller groups. And also, most people agreed that certain individuals were more worth saving than others. And this is where it gets really interesting. So here are the international across-the-board preferences, right? Women are worth saving more than men. Law-abiding people are more worth saving than people who don't abide by the law. And people of higher social status are more worth saving than people of lower social status. Pretty scary.
Why don't we just forget about the driverless cars and just start purging society?
Yeah, sweet Jesus, man. That's exactly the sort of vibes I got from this stuff, is that it just shows the complete ridiculous immorality of people. And now we're going to trust a lot of this to automated programs that have been created and programmed by people with their own decisions. And you're trusting the morality of companies like Google, which is a pretty disturbing sort of implication there, that people would be willing to trust a company that has already dehumanized its users to such a gross degree that it views them as nothing more than resources, human resources.
Yeah, absolutely. Isn't it frightening? Because, you absolutely don't want to trust moral decisions to these companies. But that's the situation we're in, unless they take note of research like this. But when you actually do research like this, what you find is some very scary moral intuitions within the population
people
of the world in general.
Damn near at that robot level as it is. Yeah.
We are. And then they broke down this into countries. And they found that, generally speaking, there were three sort of groups of countries. There were Western countries, right, which is most of Europe, the USA, Australia, and Brazil for some reason. Southern countries, which mostly includes Latin America, but also France and its former colonies, and Eastern countries, which is most of Asia, right? So, in the different groups of countries, there were different intuitions about some people. So people in southern countries were highly likely to say, save the children first. Whereas those in eastern countries didn't favor them over older people and favored older people, right? And Westerners were somewhere in between. So, as I said before, everybody had a tendency to prefer higher status people, but that tendency was particularly great in southern countries where they were much more keen to save the life of a business person, for example, than a homeless person. So, I mean, the more you look into this, the scarier it gets. I mean, unfit people get killed before fit people. Jaywalkers get killed before people who cross the road legally. It's just terrifying.
Well, what's even more terrifying is the decision is going to be made by AI technology. And whilst you were talking, I thought, well, I'll ask the AI bot what it thinks about this, and I'd like to
Brilliant idea.
I'd like to share you the result of what the bot said when I asked it what people should be saved if a driverless car crashes. Can you see the answer there?
What does it say?
Russians are not very nice.
Yeah, so the chatbot,
oh my God,
actually thinks that basically we should also make decisions based on nationality. So if you're going to hit a Russian or a European person, then you should just run over the Russian, basically, according to the bot.
I reckon we should program all driverless cars in Munich to hit Australians during Oktoberfest, because they're the worst behaved of any of them, of any of the people at that public festival.
Well, I mean,
sorry, I'm kidding. No offense to Australians.
Yeah. In a bit of a sort of a wrap up here, though, just imagine a human being making these decisions of programming the stuff into the computer in the first place. That's all fine and dandy, but no computer, no driverless car is ever going to be held accountable for killing somebody, for vehicular manslaughter or murder. I mean, when are they going to put the car to the death penalty? Human beings have a certain level of incentive to not cause crime, and they still do. To not make poor decisions, and they still do. Would a computer program that has no incentive at all to not make a bad decision, other than the fact that it's programmed to not make a bad decision, what's going to dissuade it from that?
That's a really excellent point, Seth, and it's a really excellent point, Seth, and I think if we think that through one step further, we know that corporate crimes are often not prosecuted because it's quite difficult to pinpoint who is the perpetrator. Do you know what I mean? Because responsibility for whatever a company has done is kind of spread and smeared over different departments and so on. So you can't really pick out a person and go, you did this on behalf of this corporation. And so, yeah, again, it smears the moral responsibility. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a good point to end on, a very good point that what about medical decisions? I can imagine they're going to turn everything over to the AI technology, so nobody is going to be responsible for any mistakes anymore. Well, the AI decided that it should cut your left leg off instead of the right one. It wasn't us. So yeah, I can see that's going to be a big problem. But anyway, we have run out of time. I like to keep these chats to about less than 1 hour 15 anyway, and we're just coming up to that now. So any final comments, and then we'll probably wrap up the episode.
No, just thanks for having me on again, and guys, I love doing these. Anytime we get the opportunity to do another one, I'm more than up for it.
Excellent. Thanks, Seth. It's been great having you. And Anthony?
Yeah, it's been fun as always, and I just want to say Happy New Year to all our listeners, and please don't go away with the impression that we are this serious and pessimistic about everything in our lives, only about the themes we choose for Truth Sentinel.
Actually, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that we're that pessimistic. I think we're talking just more about, when I talk about dystopian futures and where I think things going, it's not really from a point of pessimism. It's a point of just, I think that's just the reality of what's going to happen. It's not, I'm not trying to. I just think that's, you can kind of paint the picture of what's going to happen just because of, like I said, the people who are in charge. I think if we want a better future, we have to change the way we let things get run. We have to change the people in charge. But I've always said that. Anyway, thanks
Fair
for
enough,
coming.
fair
Happy New Year. Happy New Year to everybody. And
Indeed. Happy New Year.
please join us in
Yeah.
the next chat. Thank you for the guys in the chat room that joined us today. We hope that people listening to the recording will come and join us on the next chat, which will always be around the same time, I think. And we'll probably do it on the same day, even maybe Sundays Thai time at 11 p.m. I'll send out links for time, so you can check the time zone.
Sounds good to me.
Please come and join us the next time. We may do one next Sunday at the same time, and we'll probably try and do them at least 2 a month anyway. So thanks again, and goodbye, everyone.